Objection.
Madam President, I rise in opposition to the bond amendment number 1904, which, if enacted, would add another $8.5 billion to the $1.8 trillion deficit that we are accumulating this year. As many of my colleagues will recall, when Congress considered the Safe, Accountable, Flexible, Efficient Transportation Equity Act in 2005, the so-called SAFE-T Act, we included a section that required that $8.543 billion of unobligated contract authority be rescinded on September 30th, 2009. Now, the question obviously would arise, why would we do such a thing, authorize money, but then say that it would be rescinded or canceled? And it was done for one simple reason, and that is because of the size of the bill. It would have been subject to a point of order because it exceeded the budget. And so, and by the way, I would remind my colleagues, this was a $223 billion bloated and earmarked highway bill. So apparently it's not sufficient in the minds of some that we at least honor a commitment we made, which would have canceled about $8.5 billion. Please keep in mind that it was a $223 billion piece of legislation. Please keep in mind that just last fall we passed earlier this year we passed a $787 billion stimulus bill that only 10% of the money has been spent, and only 1% of the $787 billion stimulus has been spent on highway and infrastructure projects. So we know that there are many, many billions of dollars more that will be spent on highway and infrastructure projects out of the stimulus bill that has not been spent, and yet that doesn't seem to be enough. We need to add another $8.5 billion. And I would point out that this amendment, the same amendment, was considered in the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee just on July 15th and was defeated by a vote of 14-5. Well, sometime we got to stop. You know, you keep coming to the floor time after time and say, at some point we have to consider our children and our grandchildren and the kind of debt that they are inheriting. Now, this is just another $8.5 billion, which was not budgeted, which will add to the burgeoning debt that America is staggering under, and at a time when we know that tens of billions of dollars in additional will be spent on highway and infrastructure. It's almost sad to see this because it began with gimmickry in order that the bill on the floor at that time wouldn't be subject to a budget point of order, knowing that there would be an attempt at some point to restore it, which is now being made. Now, in 2005, we were accumulating deficits, but unlike anything we have experienced in the last several months and since the economy cratered back in September of last year. So I hope my colleagues would reject this amendment. It's unnecessary, it's unneeded, it's unwanted, and very frankly, it's just another sign that we don't understand how serious this deficit problem is that we are accumulating, the biggest deficit since World War II as percent of our gross national product. So I hope my colleagues will vote against the amendment, and I suggests the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.